Hey Susan, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, pretty good. Quite a heat wave we've had recently,
Yes,
huh?
it's been
Yeah.
brutal.
It's been crazy. It's almost like we're making up for the long winter we had.
I know, but we'll take it, right?
We'll take it any day.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I'm probably not going to live in New Hampshire much longer because I can't deal with this stuff.
Oh, that's
You
too
know?
bad. Yeah.
How long have
I
you
like
lived here?
New Hampshire.
Have you lived here your whole life, or is that
No. I've lived here since 2004.
2004? Okay,
Yeah.
what brought you up here?
Well, basically work. I have a background in broadcasting,
Okay.
and I had an interview for a radio job. Didn't work out, but it kept me here after my marriage ended, and I came here to start a new life, and I'm still here, enjoying Manchester.
So with marriage comes kids, right? You have any kids?
I have 4. They're all adults now. I have a grandchild also. My oldest child is 38 years old.
38. Okay.
Yeah.
What is that? What year does that make that?
1980.
19. You have
Yeah.
them memorized, right? All the moms
1980.
do, right?
Oh, yeah, all moms do, yeah. I have 2 sons. My oldest child is a daughter. Her name is Camelia, and she lives out in Milford with her husband, Brian.
Really?
And let's see, we have Nathan. Nathan is in Merrimack. He works for Fidelity Investments. He's 32. My other son, Perry, is 30. And he is with Red Hat in North Carolina.
Really? Okay.
in
Red Hat,
IT.
what do they do?
Red Hat is a government contractor for information technology.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
he does quality control out there in Raleigh, North Carolina. He loves the South. So there you
Really?
go. Maybe you would want to go visit him.
The South? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about the South. Maybe
Yeah.
California,
Yeah.
Florida, something like
Yeah.
that.
And my last child is my daughter Astra. She's 27. She lives in Nashua, and she is the mother of my beautiful little granddaughter Liliana, who's
Okay,
3 and a
that was
half.
A bunch of fun,
It is a bunch of fun. Busy life.
At what point do they start walking? What is that? All about?
Oh, well, she was toddling at about 8 months old. Any time between like 7 or 8 months, they start kind of creeping up on the couch, or a chair, and they begin the walking process. But usually by the time that they're a year, they're toddling around all over the place, a year to 18 months at the max, yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to your husband, right? So do you still have any contact with him? Is there any?
Oh, yeah, we have a good civil relationship, sure.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
always a good thing because I
Yeah.
always have people on who have had spouses who are no longer. They always struggle to have a good relationship with them.
I feel we do have a very good relationship.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
always a good thing. Family parties and all that.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, yeah, we celebrated one recently, a couple of months ago, for my son who was moving into a new house, and so we had a housewarming for him, and we were both there. Yeah.
So tell me about this, okay? Tell me this to a young person, okay? So as time goes on and you separate from someone, you still have all those wonderful memories, right?
Right.
And you want to hold on to those memories.
Absolutely.
Right? And how do you have a specific way of holding on to them? Because you want to separate that bad feeling you have, right, from those things that you need to hold on to in order to survive, right? So you do theater, right?
I do a lot of theater.
Okay. And you taught me a little bit about love and theater. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, you have to look at it as a channel. The theatrical arts is an art form, and it's an art form that uses the components of emotion and physical action and also characterization. And one of the components of characterization is to express emotion. And so many actors use the method acting, which is they become the character that they're trying to express for that moment in time that they're on the stage. And in the rehearsal process, they use certain techniques and one of them is a memory technique. They use their painful and their good memories to channel the expressions that they need for the character that they're emoting. For instance, if you need to cry on stage, you really have to learn how to think back to a painful experience in your life so the tears can come naturally.
Emotional
on the stage.
memory.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And then it takes some work. It takes a lot of, like in television, a lot of solitary work, a lot of rehearsal, a lot of practice, so that you can cue up that memory in your mind as you need to use the tears on the stage. So it's not fake. It's not anything that's fake. It's real emoting, but it's practice emoting. And so the theater is a very cathartic experience in that regard. And it's used by a lot of psychology. It's recommended by a lot of psychologists today to help people process their negative emotions. And I found it very helpful in my own life. I was a theater major at the University of Southern Maine back in the early days. I had graduated from high school in 1972, And I went to university in 1973. And so
Okay.
I majored in theater and communications, which helped me a lot when I went for my broadcasting license and my FCC license, my radio license. And I was able to incorporate that with my married life as a career.
Okay, okay. But the sad thing is, and not so sad, in theater, sometimes people say you have to be able to don bad experiences in order to elicit a kind of emotion. So is it more fruitful to have had bad things happen to you if you're an actor?
I doubt that. It's not about being fruitful. It's about using the experiences that each of us have had individually
Truly.
in the acting process. Everyone has bad things happen to them. Everyone has a certain threshold of tolerance for certain things that happen to them. And all of us have limits. And I like to say, everyone has their own opinion on this, but I like to say that God doesn't give you more than you can handle.
Yeah.
So whatever comes to us in life is many things we can't control, but we try to control our reactions to them. And in the process of life, we all make mistakes in that.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow our reactions are not always what we would wish them to be. And the only thing that we can do is, after the bad things have happened and after we've had the reactions we've had, we can examine that with the gift of hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
And try to learn from our experience and try to do better, to be better prepared for the next experience that comes along, whether it's good or bad.
Okay. Have there been any models in your life who have been the epitome of love? These are truly what lovers are or ought to be.
Well, we'd have to go back to my mother and father.
Okay.
They were childhood sweethearts. They got married at 19 years old. My father, before they were married, they were engaged. My father went off into the war.
Mm-hmm.
He served in the Korean conflict in the early 50s. He was a supply sergeant, and he wrote to my mother, and we still have his letters.
Really?
He wrote to my mother every single week. And they would come in stacks to my mother, because in those days, the mail didn't come when it was supposed to. It was, overseas, air mail and things like that. And so she would get stacks of them.
Mm-hmm.
And she kept them all these years. She still has them, thank God, because he passed away, and they were married for 56 years
Mm-hmm.
before he passed away in 2012. And so they got married in 1955, and he passed away in 2012. But that, to me, is the epitome of a loving, unconditional loving marriage.
Okay.
They stayed together through everything.
It seems now, in the modern day, relationships aren't held in the same regard as they may have been years past, right? I think love is still there, but the idea of, fidelity isn't.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we have statistics today that tell us that 1 out of every 2 marriages end in divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And there are less societal strictures in place that if you just have to go back a few generations where divorce was not legal in many countries in the world.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You were married, and it would take an act of Congress for you to be able to get a divorce. But now, in the past 75 to 100 years, in this country in particular, which is the country I know about, divorce has become a rather common way to end a marriage. The church, the Catholic Church, and other churches, I'm sure, other denominations. I mention the Catholic Church because that's what I'm familiar with. I was married in a Roman Catholic church. I have a Catholic background.
Mm-hmm.
I shared with my children the foundations of my faith, and we practiced the faith throughout our marriage, and I practiced my faith after the marriage ended. However, there's civil marriage, and then there's sacred marriage. And the Catholic Church teaches that the sacred covenant cannot be broken even if there is civil divorce.
Really?
To this day. And so, unfortunately, many, and even some, dioceses in the Catholic Church in this country don't officially recognize that they kind of take a back seat to the civil process. And so, in this country, when you have a civil divorce, you have a divorce. But according to the Catholic Church, even if you have a civil divorce, you are still sacredly bound to to the marriage. In my case, I do not, practice that tenet of my faith. I feel that I am divorced, and
Yeah,
my
you'd like to
husband
feel
feels
that
the
way too.
same way.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah, but it's not, when you have children, it's not, you never see this person again. No, they're always going to be, like my mother says,
It's a bond.
he's always going to be, you're always going to be bonded together by your children.
I heard something so sad from a friend recently. He was telling me that he went to couples therapy with his longtime spouse relationship, and the therapist told him sometimes going through therapy isn't about how to work things out; it's about how to break up. And I felt so sad about that, because I don't know. Maybe this is coming from a young mind, right? But people shouldn't feel necessarily like if there's infidelity or there's something wrong in a relationship, the other person should obviously feel sad about what happened and all that. But they might want to understand that if you love someone, right? If you love someone, you would never see anyone else. You know what I mean? And people say love dies. Love is eternal, in my opinion.
Yes,
so
I
how
agree.
could you see someone else at that point? So you shouldn't feel sad because your true love is still waiting for you. Is that right?
I agree,
Yeah.
actually. I
You know?
do agree. And rather than say that it's too optimistic to feel that way, I would say that you've aptly described the spiritual aspect of eternal love. That there's a term in sacred scripture called agape love. There, according to some spiritual scholars, there are at least 17 different kinds of love. And agape love and filial love are two really good descriptions of the kind of love that exists between friends and the kind of love that exists between associates. There's affection, filial affection, the affection between brothers and sisters. The eternal love, the soul love, the kind of love that you would hope a marriage would have is possible in a marriage, but there are stresses that need to be taken into consideration that don't extinguish that flame, but certainly can dim it. And in the moment of tension, in the moment of stress, financial overwhelm, in the moments of anxiety, in the moments of tragedy, in the moments of stressors that are outside the marriage, that are affecting the marriage but are not within the marriage boundaries.
Yeah.
There's going to be those tests, if you will, and sure, when all was said and done, and after the civil part of our union was declared null and void, I still grappled with a lot of emotional fallout in my own life, and I had extreme amounts of remorse and guilt over giving up too soon. I felt like I hadn't worked on it enough, but as I tried to reconcile my reality with my feelings, I came to the conclusion that it was a two-way stream, and it wasn't just about what I did to make the break happen.
Yeah.
And that
Everybody has to put in their equal
right. Everyone
measure.
has to realize that they have equal responsibility.
And you shouldn't push too hard because it could become harassment, right? Which you have a couple stories about. Tell us about that.
Well, I wouldn't compare those two.
Yeah,
I think they're very separate.
Yeah.
But as far as we can talk about that. That's kind of going in a backwards direction. That happened in the workplace. I think it's a topic that needs to be discussed because it's still rampant in this country. Mm-hmm. It still occurs despite your economic level, despite your workplace position. It occurs along every dynamic in the country. It occurs among the white collar jobs, the pink collar jobs, the blue collar jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody.
Yeah. And basically, it's any kind of, in my mind, the laws that have been put in place in this country in the last 10 years have really helped this new generation of women coming into the workforce have a cut and dry template, if you will, to make sure that these kinds of inappropriate behaviors don't happen in the workplace, and that these women have recourse in the courts. I don't appreciate some of the celebrity kind of people that take it a little bit too far. I think that they shouldn't be making huge multi-million-dollar lawsuit profits off of what is definitely a very much of a concern among millions
Of women, yeah.
members of the workforce. Yeah. And here's the issue that I had personally. It was so different back then. Many women I knew, women I didn't know, but I heard stories about, magazine articles I'd read. Prominent women were in positions of power,
Yeah.
positions of effect. They affected political change in this country, but they were victims of sexual harassment daily. But we had to put up with it because a lot of women had positions that they had worked hard to achieve. They didn't want to lose that paycheck they needed to help their family survive.
Yeah.
And they were interested in keeping their work, and they didn't feel responsible for the harassment that they were able to suffer. But they had no real recourse until the 1980s. And it wasn't until the 80s in this country that laws were put into place where women could go, where women could say, this is wrong, I know it's wrong, and I'm going to prove it's wrong. And go to a lawyer and say, this is what I want to do with this. And affect, real change in the workplace. Because basically, women were under the authorities of their employers, and if the employer felt like he could get away with certain kinds of behavior, most women, all they could be capable of was laughing it off and saying, well, it's something I must have done to incur this behavior, even though the women would come to the workplace immaculately dressed, even though they had the best behavior, they would still have this guilt about what did they do to make that person behave the way he did. But in actuality, a man is responsible for his own behavior in the workplace. And if he's over the age of 18, he should know better.
Yeah.
And a woman has to, be comforted by the fact that things have changed. And my own personal story is that I was working at a radio station back in the early 1990s in Nashua. And the general manager, who is now deceased, was a flirtatious individual.
Was he far older than you?
Yes, he was. I was in my late 30s.
Okay.
And he was in his late 60s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he was a well-known individual in the area, and he was a very popular person. And it was a small local station. However, he was well-known and very jovial and a very kind person in some ways. But when I worked underneath him, and there were several women that did and had the same complaint, that he was just too gregarious with his flirtation, in other words. And so one afternoon, the studio was fairly compact. The radio studio, as most radio studios are, with the old-fashioned glass around and stuff.
Sure.
And then there was a hallway. And then there was the teletype machine closet, we used to call it, because it was a literal closet. And it was just big enough for the teletype machine. In those days, the teletype machines were very noisy. They were the old daisy wheel print, and they would come automatically, and they would just have a racket.
Shake up the room, yeah.
Right. Everything in the radio station had to be silent for the broadcast to continue. So it was all closeted. But we kept the door open while we were not on the air. So the door happened to be open that afternoon. And it was only me and him on that floor. The station had 3 floors. There were 2 women on the top floor and a gentleman on the bottom floor underneath us. And he was doing something with the newspaper that was also housed in the radio station. And so I was on the air, and every hour I had to check the news and put it together and sort it out and work with it. So I got off the air, I closed my door, I went into the closet where the teletype machine was, and I was picking up the paper. I turned around, and he was probably 2 inches from my face.
Really?
And he shoved me against the teletype machine, so I was facing him, and he tried to inappropriately insert himself into my shove me against and inappropriately touch me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shoved back. And I said something to the effect that, don't you ever dare try to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
I will make sure my husband knows. And I turned around and walked out during my shift, during my new shift. And I had to be on the air 10 minutes later. And of course, I didn't go back until the next day, where I had a conversation with him. He denied it. He said it was all in my imagination. And I said, no, this really happened. And, well, there's nobody to say that it did. It was just you and me, and it's your word against mine. And so with that kind of browbeating,
Mm-hmm.
I was left to a mass of tears. I went into the bathroom. I cried. Somehow I got through my day.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of days later, my husband had been away on business, and he came back, and we discussed it, and I left the station.
Good for you.
Yeah, and that's all the recourse that we had in those days. Either we left if we couldn't put up with it. A couple of other women had worked underneath him afterwards and had similar stories to tell me after.
Mm-hmm.
So it was something that unfortunately other people had to put up with his personality. So
And
that
it's so
was my
sad
story.
because a lot of people ask, what did the woman do? Right? That's
Always.
sad. That's sad question,
Yeah,
But men
Sad.
have to be responsible for their own actions.
That's right.
Right?
that's right.
Yeah. So we're seeing in the TV, what was it? Cosby had something, and then a couple others had stuff. It just keeps coming up. It keeps coming
Yeah.
up. Because back then, people didn't have an outlet to express their emotions or express what their concerns were. And now
Right.
we do. Now we
Right.
do. That's so important.
Right, right. In the silence, there lies the tragedy.
Exactly. Exactly. So I want to get on another topic because the two best kinds of stories are love stories, which you already told,
Yeah.
and scary stories. Scary stories. So do you have anything for me that is really going to shake me
Well,
up?
it's kind of a mild story, actually. It has to do with two things that have scared me to death in my life, and both of them involving vehicles.
Okay.
The first accident I had was I was 23 years old. Had my license for a couple of years, but it was a bad winter.
Okay.
And I never had really driven in a big blizzard before.
You know about these?
Maine. I
Maine,
lived
it's in Maine. So it's a little different, yeah.
Lewiston,
Northern Maine, or is it?
No, not at all. Lewiston, Maine is 30 miles northwest of Portland.
Okay.
And it's probably in the southern tier of the state,
Okay.
you would say. But it was a very two-lane road, okay, and it was very windy coming up. And it was a brand new vehicle, okay, but it was a hatchback, okay, so they kind of funny in the snow.
Right.
So as I'm coming up the hill, somebody is coming in the opposite direction, and he swerved into my lane.
Okay.
I swerved to avoid him, but it put my back end in a spin on the ice. It was, oh God, it was a blizzard. It was really bad, and the roads were icy, and I was coming up that hill, and I spun 360, and I wound up flipping, because I was going about 40 miles an hour, okay?
Mhm.
Flipping into a creek.
Over a guardrail, or?
No, it was a narrow road
Yeah.
in the country,
Yeah.
okay?
In
And
the
I was
country.
driving to work.
Yeah.
I worked in Poland Spring, Maine, at a
Yeah,
TV
is that-
station,
okay, yeah,
Channel
yeah,
8.
yeah.
Yeah. And so it curved up, and there's a creek, not a river, but just a creek of dirty, muddy, icky water. And my car just went right in, roof first. In the space of about 5 seconds, I thought my life was over. And mind you, when you're going through that, everything becomes slow motion. It's like time stops. And I'm kind of like letting the angels drive my car. Because once I went into that spin, I let go of the wheel. And I really thought that was really, because I could
That was
feel
it.
myself going upside down.
Yeah.
But as it happened, the roof, it was kind of like a 3/4 tip, not a full 360
Yeah, yeah.
going around. So I was able to right myself up and get out of the car.
Mhm.
It was just automatic reaction without even knowing if I was hurt. I didn't feel anything, right? And I saw my window had smashed. My windshield was all smashed in the front. And it was a safety windshield, and it worked. I mean, in those days, we didn't expect safety windshields to actually work, and it was a new car, and I didn't know how, in hindsight, I looked at the windshield, I go, oh my God, it's all these little crinkles, it's great, I was expecting to have glass all over me. Nothing. Nothing. But my fear reaction came after the accident. See, during the accident, I was like, it's animated suspension.
Adrenaline too.
Yeah. But after I kind of got myself up and oriented, where am I started to get a throbbing headache. So I said, I better get to help.
Mm-hmm.
No cell phone those days, right? So there was about, I would say, a quarter of a mile away, there was a house, and I walked to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they sat me down. I must have looked really bad. She said, sit down. I just said, hi, I've been in an accident.
Like
can I have some water, please?
Yeah.
And I must have looked like hell because they sat me down. They put a blanket over me because I started to shake.
Okay.
And gave me water and asked about my parents. I go, no, I was on my way to work, call work, and I was all concerned about work, being for work. And then the old man looked at me, I'll never forget, he says, you must be okay. All you care about is talking to your boss, Yeah, I go, well, you don't understand. I work at a TV station. So he says, well, can I call anybody else? And I says, yeah, now you can call my mother. Because I was living with my parents at the time still.
Mm-hmm.
It was a year before I went off on my own. And so my mother was at work, so there was nobody home, and so that was okay. So the two guys that I work with came to pick me up,
Mm-hmm.
and it was great. But it was only, I didn't drive. I was so scared to get back on the road. I didn't drive for 3 weeks. They had to take me to work. My friends that I worked with would take me to work.
Yeah. Hopefully they lived close by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad, pretty scary,
Scary times.
Yeah,
Scary
yeah.
times. What do they have? They have that little thing, like if you get stuck underwater in your car, you can smack the window
Yes.
with it. What is that called?
I have no idea, but I know
No,
what you're
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
I have
yeah.
no
They
idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They have kits on how to break
How
free.
to get out of the water. But it wasn't that much water. There was no chance of me
Yeah, there's
drowning in a
yeah.
creek.
Yeah.
It was like maybe, I would say, no more than 10 or 12 inches of water. It was just a muddy old creek. Yeah, it was like, but it was
Muddy old
bad.
creek.
Bad enough.
Still scary enough to be
It was
stuck
scary.
in.
Yeah, the whole point was, I flipped. Yeah.
Well, I actually, something happened to me not recently, but a couple of years back when I worked over in South Willow. So I was going down, and the pizza guy, similar to what you said, the pizza guy I don't know what he was
Yeah.
doing. And I tried to swerve out of the way,
Yeah.
and I did 180.
Yeah.
So luckily it wasn't as bad.
See?
But I almost hit another car, so
Yeah.
I wasn't having it.
Did you have that same sense of like,
Yeah,
Time
this is
coming.
it. This is it. Like you never know what's gonna happen.
No. That's life?
You never know what's gonna happen.
No.
But maybe you'll live another day.
That's right. That's all we can hope for.
Hopefully.
That's why I believe in God.
Yeah. We all do.
My faith gets me through every day. Yeah.
All right, Susan. Well, you've been a wonderful guest.
Well,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
coming on my show.
Well, thanks. It's been a pleasure, Zach.
Always.